Hi, James Green here with Actual Tech Media, and I want to talk today a little bit about containers. Now, there's an interesting challenge with containers as we start to adopt them more in the enterprise, and that is the challenge of persistence. If you think about a typical virtual machine, as those files that the virtual machine is writing are written down to disk, they're stored on some volume on a shared storage array that is persisted, and if that virtual machine ceases to exist, we can go ahead and just attach those volumes to a different virtual machine and access their data. Also, we can move those volume mappings between hosts, and so a virtual machine that's running on one virtual machine host can run on a different virtual machine host and access the same shared storage. Now, if you're a developer and you're running containers on your laptop to do a little bit of local testing, it might not matter if that data persists. You know, when you're done with it, you just throw it away. As it turns out, as we move into using containers in a widespread fashion in the enterprise, we need to be able to, one, persist the data, two, do enterprise-like things with the data, like replicate it, like protect it with a certain availability SLA. And those are things that are not necessarily inherent or native in container platforms today. So a lot of people are starting to develop solutions to tackle this problem, and most of them revolve around what's called a Docker volume driver. So Docker provides a way that as the container is instantiated, we can pass storage directly through to that container, and as it writes, we can do things to it. Now, there's other purposes for doing that, but in the case of persistence, essentially the reason we do that is it writes to persistent storage, and we can treat it differently than we would if it was not being written directly to this persistent storage. So some names you may have heard of before if you're in the enterprise space are like EMC and SolidFire. Those are two that have been doing things in this space. EMC Code has a project called RexRay that kind of helps you manage this persistence, and it abstracts lower level storage platforms that you may already be using to present them to containers. Another one is SolidFire. They have a Docker volume driver, and that fits really well into their overall strategy. If you're more in the Docker container space, and that's where you're starting from, you may have heard of projects like Flocker, which is from the Cluster HQ people. There's, what's the other one? Convoy from the Rancher folks. And so people who already deal in the container space are also putting out projects to help with this. And then there's some startups who are just solely focusing on this particular issue, not just persistence, but storage for containers in general. And we've heard from some of them recently at Actual Tech Media. We earlier this year talked to Portworx, which is tackling this problem, not just of persistence, but of the way that the container storage is managed via policy and replicated and QoS and all of that kind of stuff. So Portworx is doing some cool stuff in that space. And then last week I was at Tech Field Day 12 and we heard from a company called StorageOS, who's doing the same sort of thing. Essentially, they're a storage array that runs in a series of containers. And so they provide all the enterprise storage-like features that you would expect from a storage array up into the containers. And not only that, but they also run the storage platform itself in containers. And so it kind of changes the paradigm of how your storage platform is run and maintained. It's all really interesting stuff. And as containers become a bigger part of enterprise deployments, this is a problem that enterprises are going to have to figure out how to solve. So we think that some of these solutions are pretty interesting. I would especially recommend that you take a look at Portworx and StorageOS, and in the blog post that goes along with this video, I'm going to link to them, talk about them a little bit more in depth so that you can see what we've heard from them and why I think they're interesting. Hope this gives you a little better understanding of persistence in containers, and feel free to reach out to me or any of the other folks at Actual Tech Media if you want to continue this conversation.